Hey there! Thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris and welcome to a LEGO collection showcase and ranking video. With me here I have every single large-scale LEGO pirate ship in my collection. And by that I mean pretty much every single pirate ship in existence that has sails. Now there are a few notable exceptions here, so I want to get them out of the way first before we start this video. I am missing two classic pirate ships. One of them is basically a reskin of the 2009 pirate ship, which was released all the way back in 2015. It's not really a classic one, but I didn't really see any point in getting it because it's a very similar model. Maybe one day I will. And the second one is a much smaller, actually classic pirate ship that was a really tiny ship. You can see it up on screen here, but unfortunately for whatever reason, this is ridiculously expensive on the aftermarket, and that's why I haven't gotten it yet. Although at some point I will. But besides those two, this is every single large-scale LEGO pirate ship, minus also the Ninjago Destiny's Bounties, which I have hanging on the ceiling and probably will warrant a completely separate video. And so, without further ado, let's take a look at this collection. The first two ships we have here is the original and remake of one of the most classic, famous LEGO pirate ships. This is the Black Seas Barracuda from 1989. It was really the first large-scale pirate ship LEGO ever did, and because it's so famous and such a classic LEGO set, they actually remade it just last year for the Barracuda Bay set, which was a LEGO Idea set, which essentially was a pirate island that converted into this ship. Let's take a closer look at these two vessels and see how they compare against each other, which I think is one of the coolest ways to show just how far LEGO has come over the years. This is the Black Seas Barracuda. Released in 1989, it retailed for $110 US, which converted for inflation is over $240 US today. By contrast, this is the Pirates of Barracuda Bay set, which retails right now for $200 US. You can see that this includes a full second lower deck inside, whereas this open deck is completely empty. It also has a lot more pieces and details than the original set, and there's a lot more, because this is not everything you get with the $200 price tag. You see, the original Pirates of Barracuda Bay set looks something like this, which is a full-on pirate island. And so, when you remove the ship and convert it to pirate ship form, the island that's left is still a pretty considerably high amount of pieces, which we can see right here. And so, in today's value, for $40 less than the value of the original set, you're getting a full-on extra island add-on, as well as a much, much beefier ship, which you can see right here. That being said, the original still has a ton of classic charm, and again is one of the most memorable and classic LEGO sets to this day, if arguably not necessarily worth $240 today. This set included 8 minifigures, whereas this one included 10, so really value on the newer set is pretty great across the board. But let's dive into the comparisons between these two models and see exactly how they differ. Moving this right alongside our ship right here. One of my favorite things about the newer set is that some of the parts used evoke the classic LEGO pieces, as I mentioned before. For instance, this piece right here in yellow is a pretty old and discontinued LEGO piece. Definitely not in production anymore and is a pretty unique shape that's a single-use piece. Whereas the ship itself for the newer set actually just recreated that exact piece, but with modern LEGO parts, particularly these rounded slope pieces, as well as just a standard 1x2 brick and jumper plate right here. It's a great approximation of the original part, which is now built out of modern pieces. But that's not the only added detail here. You see, the original set just had the suggestion of a black and white trim along the side, whereas the newer one actually makes it fully detailed, as you can see here, with a lot of curves and edges around the sides of the vessel. It even has a full-on ladder for people to disembark and board the ship, should they please. Our newer offering also includes a full-on back sail, whereas the older one simply just had a piece of string running along the back. Even the pirate's cabin on the newer one is a much larger space with a larger backside, compared to a slightly smaller back end here. Let's take a look now at the interiors of these ships. Now this features a very classic styled interior with a map on the wall, even a flag going down the side and 2 pairs of doors to enter the vessel, as well as of course a treasure chest for the pirate himself. In here, once you remove the captain's lodgings up at the very top, you can see that it actually has a lot more detail packed in, including a small statue in the corner, plus a full candelabra, an elaborate pirate seat. Of course, you've got a map in there as well, the treasure chest, and even a little writing station and compass on the side. I really do like just how much detail they were able to cram into the newer set, especially compared to the older one, which was still really fantastic for its day and age. Flipping this back though, we can take a look moving on to the front here. Of course, there is only one door on the newer model, but thankfully there are stairs leading down to the sides here, which unfortunately, the semblance of stairs here is pretty simple, and I think I like the technique used on the newer one a lot better, despite the door being truncated down to just one. Moving on to the lower deck, the older set has some really excellent hatches down here, which you can see to store different things inside the ship and provide some access down below, which is a nice semblance of having some sort of interior space, but unfortunately, there's really basically nothing inside these hatches and they're completely empty. Meanwhile, this ship here has a fully detailed interior, also because it's part of the Pirates of Barracuda Bay Island, which really necessitated the introduction of a full interior for the ship. Let's lift off some of these people so we can see the full inside. In there you can see a chef's quarters with a cooking station, some bottles of alcohol on the side, and even a little station up here for a letter. Moving aside the back platform, we can even see a sleeping area color-coded for two members of the crew. These two fellows right here, which I think is a very nice detail. Plus, some more stations for letter writing, some more bottles of rum, as well as even a full-on station for as well as a storage area for a spare hat and a bit of a candle down there as well. We've even got a bucket in the back there, and the interior space continues on throughout the rest of the ship. And all in all, I think that this did a much better job of evoking a full-on interior space, but of course that's not without its downsides. As you can see here, these flaps open up, but unfortunately they're just windows. There's no actual spot to place cannons, and that's something the older one actually does a little bit better than the newer set. Where you can see here, the flags lifting up actually reveal full-on holes for cannons to launch out of. And it has the full-on firing cannons right here as well, which are very fun inclusions for the sets. It sacrificed a little bit of interior space, but allows you to actually have these cannons slide back and forth and be moved around for different slots on the ship, which I think is a fun feature that unfortunately is not accommodated whatsoever in the newer vessel, especially because all this interior space means that you can't actually place cannons on the inside without them knocking over stuff. Comparing the back sides of these ships, the older one here actually has a pretty good amount of detail on the back, especially using these classic Lego flower pieces to really great use. And there's a bit of a homage to that in the newer set with this newer flower piece right here. One of the downsides to the newer model is that since it converts to an island, there's a lot of exposed studs to stick, say, foliage onto that unfortunately kind of looks unfinished on the final thing. Although, as you can see, the newer model actually managed to include a lot of nice references to the original set, right down to the red flags on the back near the rudder there. One of the things I actually really love about the older LEGO pirate ships, and particularly their sails, is that they work on both sides. You can see the red just as well on this side as you can on this side. And while that isn't a huge problem for these front-facing sails, it does become a problem for this sail right here, where for the older one, it's really great because from this side, the red is very vibrant and thick, and it's the same for this other side. But unfortunately, the newer set and the newer style of printing for cloth means that you can actually only print it on one side. And so, moving around the back here, it's very obvious that it is only a one-sided print. And the same can be said for this back flag here, where the back is considerably more faded than the front. I do wish that LEGO would still retain the technology to have full-on printing for both sides of sails, because if anything, that is the only downgrade for the newer set. It's the sails are not actually printed on both sides. Other than that though, it is still a very good approximation of what the original set is, and definitely improves on it in many ways. Especially moving on to the front of the ship here, where you actually have some very nice curved action with the special Bionicle Zammersphere launcher tubes here, whereas the original one has a pretty basic build for this. And finally, while it may not be immediately obvious, the pirate flags are actually a little bit different. This is the original 1989 pirate flag versus this one from 2020, which features a slightly different style of skull compared to the older one right here. It's a very minute and small change, but it is something that is noticeable when you put them next to each other, which I think is a nice upgrade from the original classic one. But with that, I think we've wrapped up our look at the two Black Seas Barracudas, and now we can move on to the rest of the fleet. Alright, next up here we have the Skull's Eye Schooner from 1993. This was around $123 when it came out in 1993, which roughly translates to approximately $230 US today. It was basically an upgrade over the previous Black Seas Barracuda in almost every way, and represented the next evolution of LEGO ship designs. So zooming into that, you'll notice that rotating the steering wheel here will actually turn the rudder when I rotate it, which is a really fun feature and something that not very many other pirate ships actually implemented. It's a very simple feature, just featuring some rods being stuck on the bottom ends of the steering wheel, but it works very well. It's very effective. You can kind of see once I open this up here exactly how that looks on the inside. You can see the very simple mechanism for moving the rudder as well. And it even has interior space despite having this feature with a bit of a chair and a table right here for the pirates to sit on. Of course, you've also got a lot of detail packed all the way into this entire model. One of the coolest things that included was the cannon deck right here, where you can see that these are mounted on rails. So you can't lift them up, but you can turn them side to side, which is great. So you can choose to fire out of this side or rotate and fire out of this side as well. Once you open the flap up, then you can pretend it's shooting out of this side. I think it's a really great play feature. It's honestly something that's kind of unique to the set too. Not very many other pirate ships did it, but it feels very realistic, but also works out quite well as a toy. And you can really use all the cannons on whatever side you wish. So it has all 4 cannons for either side of the model, like I have right here. Moving up to the front, the anchor is a pretty simple build. It's just string wrapped around the standard propeller piece, but that's basically as complex as you would get back in the day. And this is also featuring a full-on sail on the front, like usual, and also included the sail along the back side as well. Now, the pirate flag was pretty much the same on this model compared to the original set, which was the Black Seas Barracuda, but other than that, this is basically a massive upgrade. And another major upgrade they included was making the sail a lot larger. This upper sail here is a lot taller than the original Black Seas Barracuda sail, and all in all, that gives this a very distinctive profile. They actually produced a couple more ships alongside the same vein of this one right here, so I'll bring them over for comparison purposes. This right here is basically a smaller version of the set. You can see that this is the larger Skull's Eye Schooner, and this is the much smaller pirate vessel to go alongside it. There's even a miniature one that came alongside one of the Islander sets, which sports the same livery on the colors of these sails here. So I think all in all, this makes a pretty nice collection of black and white striped pirate ships, especially because they're obviously supposed to be from the same fleet, with the same exact logo being used on the front of the sails there. This set in particular is pretty neat because you can actually adjust exactly what angle you want the sail to be facing, can really make it go side to side or pointing outwards. But besides that, it's pretty simple. You have just one cannon to rotate and go back and forth here, like the inclusion of the musket pieces here to have an extra additional shooting action right there. And of course you have your standard rudder, as well as a very nice working compass piece right here, which actually turns based on a magnet to display the right section. It's also different from the standard LEGO compass piece, which came in the LEGO Aquanaut sets. That was a more sci-fi version, and this one here is definitely very much an ancient pirates version. Moving on from these though, we can now take a look at the next pirate ship in our massive fleet. This right here is the Redbeard Runner. Released in 1996, this retailed for $99, which roughly translates to $170 today. This is probably one of the most unique pirate ships in my collection because of the very interesting action features. You'll notice these sails have a lot more detail to them. They've got these rips and holes in them showcasing a great battle being fought, and that actually correlates to the set itself. You see, when you pull out these two Technic beams right here, like so, there's a very cool action feature that actually causes the ship to take some damage in a fight. What I really like is that not only does the back part of the ship, which is a massively built skull, also pretty cool, flip backwards, but it also has this special piece right up in the front here to cause the ship's wheel to fly backwards as well. It's a pretty special and unique feature that really only this LEGO set used and not many of the other pirate ships actually utilized. It's very easy to set up and do over and over again, which is really great. Of course, because they needed to have the back weight be a little bit stronger to flip backwards, we've got this very nicely detailed full-on brick-built skull on the back of the ship, which is probably one of my favorite parts of the entire vessel. It's a shame that they didn't have this as, say, a front figurehead, because I think that would have looked pretty cool at the front of a ship as well. Moving on, we have still some more action features here, but one thing I do want to point out is that you have this cannon that can be moved back and forth, just picked up and rotated around to swivel to the other side. It's obviously a very basic feature, but it's nice that they included that. And they have a similar thing set up for all of the other cannons on rails for this section of the build as well. Moving on here though, if you take a look, there is a suspicious looking 1x4 strip of studs here. So when you pull this, the entire sail will just fall over. And if you actually have this rigging splayed out, it goes all the way outwards, which is a very nice and dramatic action feature. Really, the next time LEGO would do a half-damaged ship would be in the Pirates of Caribbean line, so this was definitely a little bit ahead of its time. Although, unfortunately, to work in these action features, it wasn't without its downsides. For instance, it's very, very obvious that the front rigging here isn't actually attached to anything on the bottom, and it's kind of just sitting there and breaks the illusion of this being an actual ship. The other thing is that because of this action feature, there's literally no interior space, and that blue pillar right there is a very conspicuous action feature that, when activated, is even more conspicuous just sitting out of the back here. I do wish that they used some other color other than blue for this, because it would have blended in a lot better than it does right now, which, as of right now, there's literally no attempt to even cover up this section, so unfortunately this is just very clearly just right there. Another slight downside is that because you had to have the sail action feature of it falling over, there isn't another set of sails on the bottom, and it really just has the top sails here. Although one thing I do appreciate is the attempt to actually make these sails look like they're curling upwards with some nicely done rigging pieces here. Another excellent play feature of this means you can actually curl up the sails. If you actually pull on the rigging right here, it's a very simple play feature, but works out very well and actually allows you to curl the sails up like so. Of course, it's not perfect. You kind of have to get your hand in there to really curl it up, but this is a full-on intentional action feature of the set where you can curl up these sails when it's, say, docked at a port. You can do that on this side as well, just moving these upwards like so. And all in all, I think that's one of the nicest action features of the set, is that you can actually have these sails fully curled up when the ship isn't in use. But now, let's move on to the next pirate vessel on this list. From 1993 onwards, there wasn't really a major flagship pirate vessel released until 2009, with the reboot of the Pirates line, several years later. Of course, we had a few juniors offerings here and there, but nothing to the scale of this, and this thankfully filled a gap that many people were waiting for a new pirate vessel. This is the Brickbeard's Bounty, released for $99 in 2009, which roughly translates to $125 US today. This, of course, is a very basic build. Despite coming out years after the other ones, it's essentially a very similar build to some of the other ships, right down to using the classic pirate ship pieces down here, which are still in production today, as well as having just the open and bare canopy right here. One thing it does improve on is access to the cabin. You'll see two large doors right here to have minifigure access to. And if we want, you can lift up this admittedly very plain panel right here to view the interior, which has a lot of access for a pirate map and a stool. Nothing too complex or crazy going on in here, but it's nice to actually have a full interior whatsoever. Putting this back onto here, there are some additional features of the set, such as a swiveling cannon to rotate at the back, as well as a lot of extra detail on the back window here, with even 2 crossed swords being used as a brick-built design feature. Other than this though, it basically was just kind of a standard return to form for LEGO Pirates. And honestly, nothing too special to me personally about this ship, especially how it compares to some of the other LEGO Pirate ships out there. This is a very juniorized and simple offering. Despite not being in the juniors line, it still is quite the simple vessel, although it was nice to finally get another pirate ship after so many years. Now, the final classic pirate-styled ship we have to display here that isn't licensed is the latest Creator pirate ship, which just debuted last year in 2020. This was supposed to complement the much larger Pirates of Barracuda Bay set, and I think it does a fantastic job of not only replicating a pirate ship using just pure bricks, but also making sure the entire hull of the boat is fully brick built. It is a custom build, not using one of the prefab pirate pieces, and that is honestly the coolest part of the set to me, because all of the detail packed into here is brick built and handmade. They're not using the standard single-use hull pieces like the other pirate ships used here. It's actually fully brick built from the ground up, which is one of the best things about LEGO Creator. Even these sails themselves are not just classic cloth. You've got actually brick-built sails with a full-on brick-built skull and crossbones pattern on them, which is really nice to see. The figurehead itself, which is a mermaid, is also brick-built, and the same design philosophies can be said throughout the entire model. Now, obviously, you have a bit of an open deck here with just the simple cannons to fire back and forth. Those are the same cannons as before, but you can immediately see that this is a much more refined model than many of the other builds, despite being a little bit simplified for LEGO Creator. Let's lift up the top deck here so we can take a look right inside to showcase all the interior details as well. Lifting up this deck is very simple. You just have to push the sail to the side, remove the little brick-built parrot, which it's pretty simple, but it's all right. Lifting up this whole thing right here, and you can see there's even a bit of an interior and space for the pirate captain to sit and survey the map in front of him. Sure, it's not nearly as detailed as, say, the Pirates of Barracuda Bay interior, but it's still pretty nice for a Creator set of this size in particular. And it's nice when they actually put an effort into making the interior something a little bit special. Moving on to the back here, we even have a custom build for the pirate flag. Very simplified design, but it does look good against this model. And again, even the backside, all the details fully brick built up, down to the rudder in the back as well, and the back of this vessel. One excellent thing this does is actually making it fit in very well with the other vessels, because again, this looks very much like the prefab pirate hull piece, but if you compare it, you can immediately see it has a lot more detail than even the most detailed vessel here with the Pirates of Barracuda Bay set. So this is a smaller but very nice offering, and the brick-built hull is my favorite thing about this set for sure. But now with that, we've summed up every single one of the non-licensed, regular-styled large pirate ships. From the Black Seas Barracuda that started it all, to the Pirates of Barracuda Bay set, which was a remake, this Creator pirate ship here, the 2009 Brickbeard's Bounty, the Redbeard Runner from 1993, and even the massive flagship Skull's Eye Schooner. This is a nice collection of all of the pirate ships LEGO's made, and really only missing a couple of ships here and there, particularly the 2015 pirate ship, which I will get at some point, as well as just maybe a few of the junior stuff here and there. But now we can turn our attention from those to the more classic and modern Imperial-styled ships before we jump into the licensed things to wrap up this video. Let's start off with one of the first Imperial vessels, these right here. This is the Caribbean Clipper. From 1989, it retailed for $54, which is around $120 today. This was one of the first Imperial-styled ships and was intended to be an enemy to the pirate vessels, although it certainly wasn't the largest one we would eventually get. This has a couple of unique features to it, such as having the mast strung all the way on the back here, which is a pretty unique feature for the pirate ship. Usually they have them on the sides. And of course, these sails are in a completely new color as well, but they're intended to mirror the Black Seas Barracuda, which had the red and white stripes. These have the blue and white stripes, which look great and provide a nice contrast against that build. Of course, the interior is basically very simple. It's one of the first sets they made, so it's just a treasure chest with a map on the top. But it is nice to see some excellent detail for the minifigures as well, featuring one of my favorite prints for this particular pirate hat, which you can see right here. This set a precedent for many of the other Imperial-styled pirate ships to feature certain similar colors, or at least be similarly sized. And we even have a miniature rowboat to go alongside one of the bases that they produced during that year, which sports the same exact colors for the flags that you can see on this larger ship. Of course, this is a very basic design for a vessel. It just has the front mast right here. And honestly, there's a few more interesting things that we can look at for the other vessels, so let's move away from this and take a look at the next ship. Here we have the Imperial Flagship. From 1992, it retailed for $50 US, which roughly translates to around $95 US today. This is probably one of my favorite Imperial vessels, mostly because of the excellent design for the sails and the very realistic tan color scheme, which really does look like paper. I really love the design that they made for the sails here. Again, one of my favorite designs, and unlike some of the other vessels, they didn't just do this front sail and the single mast. They actually have this full-on larger sail in the back, which is very realistic and looks fantastic. I feel like this really does complete the look of this model as a whole, because if you didn't have this at all, I feel like it would be a little bit bare bones just having the front sail and mast with the front sail here. But including this really makes this feel like a complete package to me. And again, that's why this is probably one of my favorite LEGO Pirates vessels. Moving on to the details right here, you can see another one of the pirate-styled compasses. And actually, this also has an action feature. Turning the steering wheel can actually turn the rudder, working very nicely just like it does in the Skull's Eye Schooner set. So these were basically some of the only pirate ships to actually have this feature, which works really well, and I wish that more pirate ships integrated it because it's a very realistic feature for a ship to have, and one that's very fun to play with. Obviously, you can see they were able to work it in even at a ship of this size, still fully functioning as you turn the steering wheel, so it definitely is something that could be integrated even more in the future. For your cannons, you have a standard rolling setup right here, which can roll along the tracks and fire outwards on either side, just 2 in total for each side right here. And of course, you have another excellently detailed Admiral figure on the front here with that excellent hat printing. One of the nicer details on here is that they switched up the color scheme a little bit. You have a little bit of white on the front and the sides of the vessel to kind of break up the standard black and brown color scheme most of these ships had. And in addition, if you got the Imperial trading post, you also had a much smaller version of the ship to go along with it in a very similar setup, just at a much smaller scale, which honestly, maybe I even like better than the official larger set, because this is a very charming vessel, which works out very well for fitting in with this entire theme. This actually comes in one of my favorite pirate sets of all time, as I mentioned, the Imperial trading post, which we can see in the back right here. It's just an excellent little Spanish-style town, which looks really great alongside the other pirate vessels. But moving on from here, we can now take a look at some of the other Imperial vessels from LEGO Pirates. Next up, we have the Armada Flagship, released in 1996 for $50, which roughly translates to around $80 today. You can see that this is a very different color scheme and detailing than the previous Armada ships because this was its own sub-theme, despite being a very short-lived sub-theme with only 3 sets. This, of course, was their latest design for the Imperial ships, featuring a very regal-looking design for the front of the sail here, which is a very great aspect of the set, certainly makes it stand out from the other ships. But all in all, it basically is just that standard white and blue striped color scheme, which we saw all the way back on the original vessels right here. Moving to the inside of this, we've got some interesting looking features, such as moving up this panel right here. You can kind of see the interior a little bit, but there's not too much to see because unfortunately, the interior is pretty bare bones, and there's not too much to see inside this vessel. One very nice thing that this actually does incorporate, though, is a blue color scheme for the ship. You can see they recolored one of the classic pirate vessel ship pieces in a dual molding white and blue color, which currently remains exclusive to this ship, and certainly makes it stand out as one of the most unique looking color schemes for the rest of the vessels. I even really like the figurehead in the front, which, I don't know, kind of looks like a duck to me. Moving from that though, they did manage to include some interesting designs such as a flag in the front of the ship to not correspond with some of the other vessels which typically had a sail on the front, and instead they've placed that sail on the back here, although one downside is that this is very floppy. It's really easy for this to kind of feel out of place, especially because there's not a lot actually holding it in, so it really could be getting out of sorts in different angles. You kind of have to mess with it and fiddle with it to make it look actually good. Again, they've incorporated that excellent compass piece right there, and the minifigures themselves have changed a bit as well. Now, there actually is one other cannon right here. It's a sliding feature, so you can slide it back and forth, which I think is always fun to have as a sliding action here. And you can have it rotate all the way back and forth to choose what side you wish to fire the cannon from, which I think is quite realistic. I also like the use of the green base for the color scheme here to correspond with the green railing on the front of the vessel. But with that, we've taken a look at this ship, and it's time to move on to one of the much, much larger Imperial flagships. This is the Imperial Flagship. It was released in 2010 and retailed for $180 US, which is around 220 today. It is simply the most detailed and largest set that they've ever created for the Imperials line of pirates. And this is, again, one of the most impressive LEGO ships ever. It actually was not part of the official Pirates line. Instead, it was a creator expert set, which allowed them to bump the age range up a bit and make a much more detailed model. Now, of course, this is actually one of the few ships that has a fully covered top deck right here. Of course, if you flip up the inside right here, you'll really only see just a space for the cannons to be stored, but still it's nice that they actually dedicated a full-on enclosed inner deck, as you can see like that. You've even got a working anchor feature right here. Just by twisting this right here, can have the anchors start to roll outwards and then be pulled back in by spinning the wheel here. And you even have a very special shark figurehead here. Moving upwards to the top cabin, they actually have a lot of detail featured in the back here. Moving inside the ship, there's a full-on piano and organ type detail on the center, a telescope for looking out the window, and again a set of drawers and a map alongside a treasure chest. You can see all the details right here, and once we put this back, it all encloses very nicely, even if the top deck is a little bit plain. Moving on to the back side of the ship, there's a nice bit of railing on the back here. It of course uses the standard pirate pieces, but this time in dark brown for the bottom of the vessel, which does make it look a little bit more authentic. And speaking of authenticity, these sails are fantastic and some of the most realistic sails they've done as an official LEGO set yet. This is probably one of my favorite large-scale pirate vessels, or at least ancient ship vessels, just because of the amount of detail that's been packed into this, and it looks fantastic on display, with 3 sets of sails going all the way back and a triple sail down the middle, which is really large and fantastic. It easily towers over many of the other pirate ship sets of the era, and even comparing it to some of the most recent pirate vessels, it still holds up to this day, despite being over 10 years old. Alright, with our Pirates versus Imperials squaring off, it's now time to take a look at some of the unique, either one-off LEGO pirate ships or vessels, or stuff that are tied to certain licenses, like Pirates of the Caribbean, for example. Okay, this right here is the Viking Longboat challenges the Midgard Serpent. It retailed for $50 US all the way back in 2005 with the rest of the LEGO Vikings line, which means it approximately would retail for around $70-ish today. It features one of the largest sails in any LEGO pirate ship ever. I think it's actually the largest one that they've produced for a vessel, and it actually does look pretty realistic with the tan coloring all around, despite being pretty easy to wrinkle and crease up, especially the way that it's mounted on, which is a little bit unfortunate. Sail aside, this had a number of additional features for Viking fans and LEGO pirate ship fans as well. It's one of the first times we actually got a full complement of crew to row the vessel with these larger oars, as well as a whole missile launcher setup in the front, which you can launch like so. So you can see this shoots off depending on how strong you hit it. It sometimes will go far and sometimes it won't. So this is a bit of a finicky mechanism, but it does have that kind of fun action feature, although I will say These are not particularly historically relevant or make sense with the Viking ship in general, so maybe I wouldn't have chosen a bright red color for the projectiles. Alongside the back here, you'll see some fun details such as a whole roasting area for roasting some chicken to eat so you don't get hungry alongside a long voyage like you can see right here, and just some treasure in the back. That being said, I will say this is a pretty sparse vessel all around. You can see that there's not too many details that are kept on the interior. It's basically just kept wide open for people to play around the inside. Now, is this worth $70-ish today? I would say that it definitely evokes the style of LEGO ships and even just LEGO sets back in the day around the 04 to 07 era, where they really were trying to go for big, not much substance to their own vessels or their own builds, but definitely a lot of shock and wow value with just how big they are. You can just look over at the Exo-4 series I have on the wall here as one of the biggest indicatments of the kind of phase that LEGO was going through at the time, where they were making things really big but have a lot of gaps and not a lot of substance to them, which I think some people do like. Some people like the way they do stuff now. Personally, I'm good with a mix in between. Certainly there are some downsides and upsides to making models like this, and while I'm happy that we have the models that we have today, I still remember back when stuff as big as this could cost only $70, so that certainly is something to keep in mind. Okay, so this right here is the Skeleton Ship Attack, which retailed for $70 in 2008, but came with a whole castle dock to go alongside it, so it isn't a really good representation of the value. This is the Troll Warship, which also came out in 2008 and retailed for $80, and also came with a large molded dragon alongside it. So neither of these are just what you're paying for. They did include a few extra things for them to combat, but here we are having the focus put on the vessels themselves. One thing I really like about the fantasy era ships is how unique and different they are from normal pirate vessels. You don't just have your standard set of sails facing the regular way and maybe just a triangle-shaped sail at the front. They actually were going for different vessel types and stuff that would make sense for the given factions. First of all, right here, we get an excellent piece for the cloth sail right here for the Skeleton faction, looking appropriately evil looking and run down. And the boat itself has some interesting shaping near the front of the bow here, and even a bit of a launching feature to launch bullets off the front. Moving on to the side and interior, we basically just have a treasure chest on the inside, but what I do love are the dark red detailing and the shields on the sides of the vessel, which really make it come alive. Now, of course, back here, there's not a ton to see because it is one of these smaller vessels, but I do like the inclusion of the Batman bat wings here to really evoke that rundown and skeletal vibe of this entire vessel, as well as the claws of these skeleton pieces going up, arcing along the side here. The Troll Warship, on the other hand, is again a pretty unique vessel as well. You can see right here that you've got a large cage in the center of it to store any prisoners, and one of my favorite features is using a large Big Fig Troll as a drummer here to keep the rhythm of the boat rowing. This is also one of the few vessels to actually include a full set of oars for the trolls to actually row the boat alongside, plus two little deployable vessels here, which admittedly aren't adhered to the ship very well, but I guess it's because they're meant to be detachable. So you can see right here, you've got one on either side. The sails themselves are pretty unique, especially for a LEGO pirate ship-like vessel, with a unique shaping that has only really appeared in this particular ship. Of course, you have to have some standard features of a pirate ship though, such as a large net to hold prisoners, but all in all, it's a pretty unique one, and it uses a different shape for the front of the boat as well. Next up, we have a massive LEGO vessel that kind of bridges the gap between original LEGO themes and licensed themes. This originated with the LEGO Movie line in 2014. It is MetalBeard's Sea Cow, which costs around $250 back then, which roughly translates to $280 with today's money. Now, the reason why I kind of call this both licensed and non-licensed is that while it is of course based off of an original LEGO IP, the LEGO Movie, the ship itself belongs to the whole overarching LEGO Movie property, which in and of itself is technically licensed. So this is kind of an in-between. It's really the final original LEGO IP or idea that is featured in this video. The rest of them beyond this will be purely licensed picks, so let's take a look at this right now. It is unlike any other vessel LEGO has really ever produced just because of the very unique steampunk-esque nature of it. Of course, you got a very nice and cute, unique figurehead right here in the form of the sea cow itself, and moving on to the sides of it, you'll notice that there's a lot of details to make this a pretty short and stout vessel, but go upwards in a very tall manner, which again is something that very much sets it apart and gives it a almost cartoony look and feel, which isn't necessarily all that bad. Zooming into the back details here, you'll notice a vast array of different propellers and all sorts of different stuff keeping it afloat, such as many different engines in the back here that spin around and do all sorts of different stuff. And you even have a large throne or chair for MetalBeard, who actually appeared in the set as a smaller buildable figure, which you can see on screen right here. Alongside here, you'll notice that this is one of the few ships on this list that actually has full-on engines with a steam smokestack like so. And what's really nice about this is that you can grab this whole thing and take it off. So setting that aside, notice some details like some coins being stashed under there. But you'll notice the interior actually is fully stocked with a full battalion of cannons, cannonballs, even some interior detailing here, as well as turning this smokestack here to raise and lower the anchors on both sides. You can see one here and one over here. So that's a pretty nice feature. Moving inwards, there's actually quite a lot of decent interior detail in this vessel. Let's start by removing a few things up on the top so we can actually take a look at what's inside here. Some nice cabin detailing bits like so, even some portraits, special stickers, and some blueprints as well for some stuff relating to the original LEGO Movie, so that's nice to see. Now, unfortunately, you can't quite pull off this level, but you can kind of see what's on the inside in this section right here. If I can get my camera to kind of zoom into there, not a ton of stuff happening in this particular interior section, but there's still some details like some sort of engine valving, whatnot going on in there, so at least some interior detailing, more than you'd expect for a ship like this. Another thing I do like are the usage of these Technic connector pieces as actual cannons on the side of the ship, so that's pretty cool as well. Zooming out, this is definitely a very unique vessel for LEGO standards even. Certainly something that I wish that LEGO would revisit from time to time, making a full-on fantasy-esque ship like this that is completely different than anything we've seen before in LEGO, and really anything we've seen since. Love a lot of the very unique parts usages for the ship, and this remains one of my favorite and most unique LEGO vessels to date. Besides one very small vessel with a sail from another LEGO theme, this one being the Adventurer's Orient Expedition lineup, which is a charming vessel but definitely very small, we can move on to our first licensed LEGO vessel. Right here is the LEGO Harry Potter Durmstrang ship from the Goblet of Fire series from LEGO Harry Potter. This actually came out during a time when LEGO Pirates wasn't actually running in its full form. In fact, when this came out, most of the classic LEGO Pirate stuff that was coming out around the time were the junior stuff, which explains why the boat hull is a completely separate prefab piece like so. This is all basically one large piece for the juniors line of pirate ships. That being said, they definitely took that hull and made it a little bit more of an advanced model than what you'd expect from a junior ship, especially with some detailing on the side, some exclusive printing on these shields there, as well as some unique angles to actually make this have a distinct silhouette. One of the favorite things I like about this ship in particular is just how unique the angles of certain sails are. You've got one piece up here that's kind of slightly tilted forward, so that definitely gives it a unique look and feel. And this was also a time when LEGO was investing heavily into chrome pieces, so you can see just some fun chrome pieces here and there, so that's pretty cool to see on a whole vessel like this. You can actually lift this whole section off right here. Take a look at the admittedly very sparse interior of just two chairs and a table. Nothing really special going on there, but you You can kind of look underneath this table and see that you actually have some hiding storage space right there. Not that you can really do much with it anyways, though. In here, though, you can actually see there's some more space that you can play around with. This whole back section actually can be removed, but it doesn't really do much itself. Let me just remove it like so. You'll notice it actually, after removing the figure here, and you kind of have to remove a few other stuff like the mainsail here as well. This whole thing splits open, so it actually is pretty nice how you get some detail here, such as an exclusive scroll print, as well as just some bookshelves and cups and magical items and whatnot. But one thing I don't really like is just how much you have to disassemble it to even make this happen. You actually have to take the whole mast permanently off, and it's not like there's an easy way to do that. It really just feels like you're taking it apart, so not one that I feel worked out very nicely as a play feature, but it definitely is nice to actually see an interior. And of course, you can still kind of see it by opening up the doors here as well. Putting this and the figure back on the ship, we can then zoom out and notice that this is also a pretty uniquely shaped vessel. Doesn't have any standard sails, unfortunately, but the set did come with these very special flag pieces, which I think are pretty cool, especially for castle stuff. Now, unfortunately, the one that I purchased only had one of these flags. It's actually supposed to have multiple flags streaming down the sides here. I just got the one with my ship, but thankfully that made the price a lot cheaper as well. So definitely some compromises to make in that regard. Down here, I just really like some of the arch detailing that you can see forming up the back here, and unfortunately, really that's about it for this vessel. Some fun details, but it is pretty juniorized, so we can probably move on to the next ship. Alright, but first up here, we have the first full-on licensed vessel in modern eras. This is the Black Pearl from 2011. It cost $100 back then, which roughly translates to $118 today, so it'd probably be something close to $120. This is one of the most coveted and sought-after ships, being the flagship of the Pirates of the Caribbean line, and today on Bricklink, you can find it going for almost 4 to 5 times the original price if you're lucky, so that's pretty crazy and another story in and of itself. Zooming into here, it definitely has a very striking silhouette as a LEGO vessel, being one of the only ones to have pure black sails, but if you go past the sails, to be completely honest, it's not too different from most other LEGO vessels. It doesn't have a large top cover area, it has a pretty exposed space here, and the cabin is basically just stuff that we've seen before from other LEGO pirate ships. Even the interior is fairly basic. You don't really have anything specific to Pirates of the Caribbean or anything that was seen in the movies even, just a simple chair and a table with some bottles right here and a map. So nothing that really ties it to the specific license. It is, of course, one of the more basic ones. One of the things I do like, though, is the extreme height of the vessel. You've got multiple sets of sails, so you got 2 at the front, 1 triangle-shaped sail up here, 3 on the top here, and like how these really form a slope, and then 1 in the far back. So it definitely has a pretty striking appearance from all different angles, and especially when you look at it kind of looking upwards at the vessel, really does look fantastic and pretty formidable as a whole ship in and of itself. This is, again, very iconic due to its appearance in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but I will say without those movies, it is basically just your standard ship. Okay, so right here we have the next Pirates of the Caribbean vessel. This is the Queen Anne's Revenge, which retailed for $120 in 2011, which roughly translates to $140 today, give or take a couple of dollars. Now this, I will say, in comparison to the previous vessel, certainly has much more unique things about it than most other pirate ships. First of all, of course, the sail configuration is basically the same or very similar to the Black Pearl. It's got the 2 up front, 3 stacked in a triangular shape here, and then 2 triangular ones on the front and back respectively. But what's very unique about this vessel is the skull motif going all alongside the entire ship, as well as some extra stuff going on here in the back. So starting off, we have our first and only appearance of the LEGO Ninjago Skulkin skeleton piece in transparent orange, which is super cool to see. And the bone motif continues all along the side of the ship as well. You can see it going all along here. And you even have the classic Lego skulls making up the back of the ship, which is something I find to be a really fun and kind of ironically cute feature. Even some skeletons hanging from the top here, and another great detail is this whole window in the back, which is an expertly detailed panel right here, which continues all the way up to the top. You even have this large lantern that's flaming in the back here, so all sorts of really cool details. And one of my favorite things about this one is that you can actually see this whole cloth side piece right here. No other Lego pirate ship has something like this, and it certainly is quite unique, having some sort of an awning over this whole window right here. Moving on to the interior of the vessel, it's basically what you would expect. Nothing too crazy going on. You can actually lift this hole up right here, but looking inside, you basically just got a map and a table. Nothing too crazy going on, but not necessarily means that it needed anything anyways, so it's just something to consider. It's a very basic interior, and again, like most of the other vessels on this list, this doesn't actually have any exterior covers or anything. You just got a pretty open space, but you do have the fully firing cannons all lined up alongside the side of the vessel right here. You even have stickers for each of the flags that have a little extra added decoration alongside the sides of the ship, again continuing the skull motif, but these are pretty annoying to put on because you have to basically put the same sticker on a ton of times. Of course, you have a pretty basic anchor here. It can be wound up, but it's really just super basic like so nothing too crazy going on there. And all in all, I think between the two Pirates of the Caribbean ships, obviously the Black Pearl is the more iconic of the two, but I think that visually and play feature-wise, I think I like this one a little bit more as a Lego build, just because it does something pretty unique and has this very special shaping all around the side of the ship. Okay, so for this vessel here, we have the final Pirates of the Caribbean ship. This is the Silent Mary, which retailed for $200 in 2017 and is quite possibly the most unique Lego pirate ship ever. Because, you see, it's not really a ship, more so as it's a shipwreck. And it's basically pretty much just hollow underneath, which means that building this is completely different than any other Lego pirate vessel ever, and this has a ton of very interesting features packed in. So let's get the biggest one out of the way here first. If you're eagle-eyed, maybe you'll notice that there's some interesting ratchet joints here. Now, in the movie that this was featured in, the ship could actually move upwards and quote-unquote eat other ships and actually have these parts act as teeth and chomp them down. And to my surprise, Lego actually features that as a play feature, and it's certainly a very unique one. If you grab this, and yeah, kind of have to be careful with it because some pieces can fall off here and there, but this all ratchets upwards. This whole sail kind of collapses. Surprisingly, it's just mounted on one ball joint, but there's enough flex in here to allow it to be really fully controlled, and you can really tilt this all the way up like so. Get rid of the stand like right here, so just put this stand aside. And then even here you have little pieces on these side corners to actually keep it upwards. So if you really want to get around here and display it in the chomping other ships kind of display like so, you can really go for it and do that, which is definitely a very unique setup for a Lego pirate ship. And if you look underneath, you have some very special animals as well. This came with some exclusive Lego animal molds. Let me just move this upwards here. It's probably one of my favorite redesigns of a standard animal mold. This right here is the classic man-eating shark, but instead it has been zombified and it's kind of a resurrected undead shark, which is super fun because, as you can see, if you put a minifig inside, you can kind of see them still moving around in there. So it certainly is such a cool piece to include. This is probably one of my favorite Lego animal molds ever, and I really wish that they included this mold in more sets other than this one Lego Pirates of the Caribbean set because it's such a fun mold. But zooming out and let's just kind of reset the ship as a whole, that certainly is a really fun play feature, albeit very, very finicky. So you'll notice that I'm being quite careful with how I'm kind of bending stuff around, and the reason for that is because there's a lot of just loose bits on the ship that can just kind of fall apart if you're not being too careful with it. Really kind of surprising to see something like this be featured as a Lego set, because in many ways this honestly kind of feels a little bit more like a mock than an official Lego set, just because of how fragile fragile it can be at certain areas. Putting the stand back on there, we can now kind of move this back down like so. And let's put our sail back up here to get this all situated. Taking a look at the top-down view, of course, you don't really have an interior because this is all just basically hollow underneath, just holds the sharks like so. But you also don't really need one because you have a good amount of detail up at the top here, lots of space to pose minifigs and have them be manning these cannons right here, which are a little bit smaller than normal LEGO cannons, but definitely work for a ship at this scale. You even have some additional cannons kind of poking around the sides here, so all sorts of very interesting details. Unfortunately, again, really no interior, nothing that's going on inside here, but I don't really think this ship needed it because it already has so much going on up at the front. Honestly, to me, this feels like the pinnacle of what you could do with LEGO for a ship design like this. It is hands down my favorite LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean ship, one of my favorite LEGO vessels in general. Despite it being fairly fragile, it's one of the coolest ones out there and certainly gives it the whole ghostly appearance. The feature on the front to chomp other ships is just an added bonus, and that's something I find really cool. So there's just one last licensed LEGO vessel here. This is the pirate ship Ambush from LEGO Lord of the Rings, which retailed for $100 back in 2013, which roughly translates to around $113 or so today. I've also included and shown off this LEGO Hobbit vessel right here, which is just kind of a side pirate ship too. Really, the only thing special is this very nice printed shield on the side and a nice technique for the curled up sail here, albeit very simple. Moving on to this main pirate ship though, you have a few pretty interesting things for this. Of course, the shaping of these sails is very different compared to many other LEGO vessels out there. This is much more of a Corsair pirate vessel. It's a pretty unique design. You've actually got some fun detailing in the form of some stickers on the planks of the wood right here, even some stuff covering up the barrels on the side. And of course, the one thing I will say is that right here you've got this whole crossbow-like thing, but it just is a flick fire missile, so it's kind of just obviously a missile. Kind of does away with the whole suspension of disbelief, unfortunately, with these pieces trying to evoke a crossbow. Personally, I wish they used a different piece there, but this was back in 2013 where for some reason LEGO was really a big fan of throwing these flick fire missiles in basically everything. So they've kind of lessened back on that for a little bit now, but that time was pretty funny. So nowadays, you don't see these cropping up in every set, but back then, in 2013, you would see these in almost everything, and it was almost comical how frequent they were in LEGO sets. You have these movable anchors on the side here by ratchet joints, which is nice to see. A whole brick build for an anchor, pretty simple, and a whole ramming section up here as well, which is also pretty unique for a pirate vessel. Moving on to the inside here, you just have a simple jail cell, nothing too crazy going on, but some fun sticker detailing on the back here. And beyond that, this is basically what you'll see from this whole ship. Unfortunately, again, like some of the modern LEGO pirate vessels, this does not have sails printed on the other side. It's really only just printed on one side, so there is one camera-friendly angle, this side right here. But it doesn't honestly look too bad from the quote-unquote camera-unfriendly angle like so. You just kind of have to see the backside of the sails. One thing I do really like is just how many of these special printed shields are included. You have a ton of these shields going alongside the front and back of the boat, which really gives it a pretty unique texture. Outside of that though, this isn't anything too special, and we can probably move on to the wrap-up. I just wanted to end the video with a quick look at some of the other sailed LEGO vessels, which I actually currently have hanging from the ceiling, namely the ones I mentioned at the beginning of this video, everything related to the Ninjago Destiny's Bounty. So the Destiny's Bounty is the classic flagship for all of LEGO Ninjago, first appeared in 2012 in this form right here. Recently got a remake of that exact format just last year for the Ninjago Legacy line. You can see the much improved craft right here with a ton of actually good interior space and a fun function. And even the LEGO Ninjago movie got its own version, which is probably one of the best LEGO sailing vessels to date, with a vast amount of interior space and tons of Easter eggs and references to the show itself. Moving on, we actually also have one more vessel going all the way around over here. We got a version of the Destiny's Bounty for the Ninjago Possession Wave. This was the final flight of the Destiny's Bounty. It has some decent cabin space, a pretty fun function for the back engines, and actually was recently remade for Ninjago Legacy just this summer. In fact, this set isn't even out in the US yet. I just got it a little bit early recently, so I wanted to kind of showcase them next to each other here. Beyond those, there have been some land versions of the Destiny's Bounty, namely this land bounty here, which definitely does not count as a pirate ship or any sort of LEGO sailing ship, despite having some similarities in terms of shaping, as well as the Hydro Bounty down here, which is a submarine version of the vessel, which looks even less like a standard pirate ship. But just something I wanted to mention is kind of something along the lines of a LEGO sailing vessel. Alright, and with that, we've taken a look at all of the larger pirate ships with sails in my collection. Let me know down in the comments below which of these is your favorite, and would you like to see LEGO Pirates make a full-on return outside of just one idea set? If you own any of these, let me know how you found these sets, and I hope the building experience went as well for you as it did for me. Thank you all so much for tuning into DuckBricks, and definitely stay tuned for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks so much, and bye-bye for now.